Welcome to Beans and Breakdowns, a podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between specialty coffee and the heavy music community. On this episode, I'm joined by Nick Young, the vocalist of Toronto deathcore band Pillars of Autumn. I really enjoyed getting to sit down and chat with Nick and learn about his coffee tastes in the Toronto area. As a Toronto native, it was awesome to hear about some of the different shops and roasters there. So grab a fresh cup of coffee and wake the fuck up! What's going on, Caffeinated Crew? I'm here with Nick Young, vocalist of Pillars of Autumn. Nick, how's it going today?
Not bad, man. Not bad. Thank you so much for having me.
You're in Toronto, is that right?
Yes, sir. Toronto, Canada, born and raised.
Awesome. Well, here on Beans and Breakdowns, we're going to talk about some metal, some coffee, everything that we enjoy. But let's start with the coffee. What are you drinking right now?
Right now, I'm currently drinking it's funny, this kind of ties hand in hand. I'm currently drinking Coheed and Cambria, my favorite band's Beast Ground Blend coffee. It's a medium roast, very, very good. I love it. I always like it when bands do really fun collaboration things. So this was kind of I've never kind of bought one of these, so I really wanted to jump in and see exactly how it tasted. I just had to know how it tasted, and it's been like my go-to ever since, man.
Do you know what roaster they're using for the collaboration, or is it just a house roaster that they work with?
I think it's a house roaster that they work with somewhere in Nyack, New York. Okay. And yeah, it's really cool. I know it's direct trade. It's a Africa, Papua New Guinea, South American blend. Really, really good.
That sounds great. Probably a lot of good, fruity mixed with kind of nutty flavors in there.
Very nice medium roast, very full bodied. So, and yeah, you really get those nice notes really peeking through at the end of a sip. So it's really nice for waking you up in the morning. Very bright, very, very fruity. It just kicks through perfectly. That's
awesome. I love Coheed and Cambria, so I'm
right on.
I'm fucking jealous. I'm having a 94 Celcius micro roaster in Montreal. They recently released this Mexican single origin called Rosalba Cifuentes. That was really hard to say for some reason.
That sounds absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's delicious, and it's super freshly roasted. Like it was roasted a couple of days ago.
Wow.
So, or not a couple weeks ago, but that's fresh.
Right on.
But yeah, it's got a lot of good brown sugar notes, apple, and some maple syrup. So
the Canadian pride coming through.
I just assimilate into the culture, right?
I'm glad you're fitting right in, man. It gives me a reason to come up to Montreal sometimes, I'll have to go check them out.
For sure. We have stores that specifically just stock micro roasted coffee from around Quebec. And I kind of go in there like a little kid in a candy shop.
Yeah, that sounds today, beautiful.
Boys.
That sounds beautiful. Awesome.
Really, yeah, it's really good. So cheers.
Cheers.
Toronto, I know, is equally equipped with some delicious roasting and coffee shops. Do you have a favorite local shop that you get?
Yeah, so I actually have two. So I'm also, along with coffee, I'm a very big cannabis connoisseur. So we have this wonderful cafe, this I should say chain of cafes here in Toronto called just The Cafe. And you go in and it's wonderful because it's very Amsterdam kind of experience. You go in, you can either choose coffee or you can choose cannabis or you can choose both. So I absolutely love going in there. The staff is wonderful. The pick of roasts is just out of this world. They have something new every week, which is something I love. I love that they're constantly switching their menu. And then if I were to pick something lesser known in Toronto, there's a beautiful place on Bloor Street. It's called the Coffee Pocket. They make this absolutely wonderful. I know I'm a huge black coffee fan, but every once in a while I kind of like to step into the realm of sweeter coffees. So they have this wonderful, kind of like a sponge toffee coffee, but it's a honeycomb that kind of sits on top,
Ooh.
dissolves into the coffee. It's beautiful. It looks great, and then it also tastes great to boot. So I got to give a shout out to Coffee Pocket. They're wonderful. The staff there as well, absolutely beautiful. They really make you feel like you're getting the best out of your morning when you walk in there.
That's really cool. I love it when it's like a kind of a Japanese kind of tradition to do those interesting coffee drinks. Have you seen the one that's like the sugar cloud where it like rains?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm with you. I drink black coffee a lot, but then sometimes you got to have a sweet treat.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like Eastern culture always does so many really cool things with coffee. So I mean, it's awesome to love your your typical African blends and South American blends, but then every once in a while I got to throw it to our friends out in the Eastern areas because they just do some wonderful things with coffee.
One thing about Toronto coffee too is you guys do a lot of the rainbow and like colorful latte art.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's like one cafe here in Montreal that does it, but I was so surprised when I went to Toronto. Every cafe, it's like, you want a colorful artwork? It's like, sure.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you gotta love. Toronto is a very, very beautiful. I know Montreal is as well, but Toronto is just beautifully multicultural background. It's such a melting pot of different cultures. So you always have, and that actually goes for cultures outside of just nationality as well. You know, you're looking at there's a really, really supportive LGBTQ community here. You have all these little kind of small communities that come together and just share these wonderful things. And it's funny when one thing kind of grabs people's attention and everyone wants to do it. So Toronto is wonderful that way.
I know that there's a ton. I've tried a few roasters actually on the podcast from Toronto as well. Like DeMello has been there for a long time, and Pilot, and
DeMello and Pilot are perfect.
They've gotten really big. Even since I lived in Montreal. And then we get a lot of 49th Parallel, but 49th Parallel is kind of getting pushed out from all the smaller like micro roasters here. And I know that's from Vancouver, but they're kind of a Canadian staple at this point. But I definitely love, there's a shop I've been meaning to get to in Toronto. I can't remember what neighborhood it's in because Toronto's huge and overwhelming to me as a Montrealer now, but it's called Major Treat. I don't know if you're familiar with this shop.
I'm not, but that sounds awesome.
It's sick because it's in the Minor Threat, logo, but it's
wow.
And it's like a barbershop and a coffee shop in the same kind of like space.
See, can we get more fusion shops like that?
Yes,
I feel like it's so cool.
One thing can be two things, okay?
I want to sit down. Yeah, I want to sit down and have my hair cut, and I want to be served a beautiful coffee. That'd be awesome.
Yes. Please give me my washed Ethiopian single origin while I get my sick fade, okay?
Please.
Yeah, Toronto's so rich in just coffee shops and roasters and even microbreweries. Like me and my wife are big into, my wife more than me, but big into craft beer.
Okay.
And so when we went, it was like, oh, we got to hit all these breweries. We don't have enough time.
Too many microbreweries and too many micro roasters to try here in Toronto.
Yeah, and it's really cool. But yeah, I got to try Kento when I was there, which Kento is just so cool. A lot of their glasswares, and they even make coffee brewers and stuff like that. Yeah. But they're doing a lot of the traditional Japanese style of coffee brewing and coffee culture, which is refreshing, especially in a Western market. Super rich coffee culture in Toronto. That's why Canada as a whole, it seems like the bigger cities have huge respect for the coffee culture.
I completely agree, and I love it too because when I first started drinking coffee, I was very simple. I really enjoyed, for Canada, obviously Tim Hortons. I was huge on Tim Hortons. I know they're not the best out there, but they're a staple for anyone from Canada. But as I started to delve deeper and deeper, it was just really nice to be in a city that you can really explore and you can really peel back the layers of what makes coffee so awesome. And then even the people you meet. I have a buddy here in Toronto named Jonathan Friedman. I'm going to shout him out. He's wonderful. He has his own own coffee company right now that he's starting up. I got to try to figure out what the name of it was again, but he's such a wonderful human being. And he really introduced me to a lot of amazing things coffee wise. So I attribute a lot of like where I've grown with coffee to him. And he also plays in a band called 16 Loco. So, it's kind of hand in hand as well. It's great. The community here when it comes to coffee is very welcoming. I don't feel like there's a really big elitist kind of feeling to people, which I really like because I'm just not a fan of exclusivity. Inclusivity always. Inclusivity always.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think a lot of people have been chased away by specialty coffee and third wave culture because of the elitism. Just
of course.
I think it's so funny. There's so many comparisons between coffee and music to me, where it's like you find your flavor, you can explore the other flavors around it. So, maybe you don't like Lorna Shore. Well, have you ever listened to like, I don't know, Converge? There's different. You can try out different coffees. You can try different origins. There is a plethora of possibilities to explore in both of these. And I feel like even in the music scene, there's a lot of elitism, just like in the coffee scene that a lot of people have felt, kind of pushed off, even though the metal and hardcore subcultures should be very inclusive and welcoming because it's made up of people that don't really, fit into what would be regarded as like a normal culture. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So definitely I'm with you. Like there's room for everybody and, we should give people room to explore what they like, what they don't like, and everybody can have their own flavor. And that's what makes it so fun and interesting.
100%. I think it's habitual for us as humans sometimes to be kind of like cliquey. And I mean, not some of us more than others.
Yes.
But even in the local scene here, like we have like a really wonderful, I'd say now it was very rich, maybe 5-10 years ago when I first started getting into the scene, but there was this big exclusivity thing where, there's all these local bands and I was just bright eyed and young and was like, this is wonderful. I love this music. I love local band culture. But the only thing I didn't like about it was this kind of exclusivity where it would be like, it almost felt like you were going through generations of local bands. So you'd have like this generation where it would be all these great bands, but if you wanted to be a part of that generation, it was like, no, we're the guys right now. We're the ones here right now. You'll have your time. You'll have your spotlight. I don't know, a few years down the line. Right. And we're kind of seeing a resurgence of that right now. But myself as a big part of the local Toronto scene, I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm really involved. I love to be really involved. I always try to tell people like, just include everybody. We don't get anywhere. We don't progress as a genre or even a subculture by blocking people out and by gatekeeping. And it's the same could go for coffee. I remember a long time ago, I was so averted to moving from Tim Hortons. I'm going to go back to Tim Hortons story. Yeah. I was so averted to moving from them because I'd have these people I went to college with who were, very, very, exclusive about their coffee. And they would, I went to a little place in Toronto called Humber College and, there was this little group of people who were like, oh, you're just getting into coffee. Well, why don't you try this and try this and try this? And it was wonderful. But there was this one person in particular who was kind of like, if you're going to drink coffee like that, because at the time I was not used to black coffee at all. Had no interest in it. Right. I was a double kind of guy, 2 creams, sugar. And, she looked at me and she was just like, if you're going to drink coffee like that, then you shouldn't be allowed to drink it at all. And it just put such like a sour taste in my mouth for a while. And I wasn't really sure what to do about it until, eventually I got to a point and a mindset where it's kind of like, I don't give a damn what these people are doing. I should just do and love what I love. So I started exploring and I met these good people who were, focused on forwarding my coffee experience. And here I am now. I'm still learning as time goes on. Like you're telling me about these microbreweries and I'm sitting there going, are these micro roasters? I'm sitting there going, that exists. I need to try this out. Yeah,
it's man. And I tell people, cause I mean, you listen to some of the other episodes where, people know a bit less about coffee and it's fine. There's no judgment because everybody's at a certain level. Just like, when you get into music or you learn about anything, there's a learning process. But there's a rabbit hole that once you see, you kind of get the matrix, you take the pill and you go through the jelly mirror, and it's like there's no turning back because you've seen what's over there, and it's like, oh my God, I don't know.
Exactly.
I think I'm in too deep.
Yeah, I kind of laughed on the episode with Marcus just because it's so funny to hear him just go, yeah, I'm a Starbucks guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just I know like where I was and where I've been, so it's kind of funny to just step back and go, yeah, I remember being that guy. But if he keeps going down the rabbit hole, then he'll find more that he loves about it. Let's
transition into some of the music stuff.
Sure.
I want to know about your introduction to metal music.
I love telling this story because it's just like how I'd want every young kid to feel about finding metal for the first time and finding deathcore for the first time. When I was in high school, I had a buddy named Johnny, and we're not too close anymore, but he really introduced me to a lot of things that I love about deathcore and metalcore and like all these wonderful things that come out of them, like the community and everything. And I remember the first time he showed me Suicide Silence, and I was like, I don't know if I'm a fan of this kind of stuff, whatever. And as we kind of transitioned out of high school and I kind of went and started exploring on my own, I really, really fell into this deep dive rabbit hole with deathcore music, where it was a new album every night, different artists every night, all this like crazy deep diving. And I remember what in particular, I heard As Blood Runs Black's Allegiance album for the first time, and that was it. I was set on a path to discover every MySpace era deathcore band, and it was just insane. It felt like I was trying to live in a scene that was so long past. This would have been 2015, so not long ago, but 6 years ago. And ever since then, I've just been a nut. My bandmates will say to me all the time, "You're like a historian when it comes to this kind of music." So it's great. I tell people all the time, like, don't be scared of the elitism and don't be scared of the gatekeepers. Like, there's so much wonderful music, and don't let people form opinions for you. Like, listen to something and form your own opinion. You love it or hate it, either or. But yeah, deathcore has been my absolute favorite. I've dabbled in other kind of metal genres, and I find things I love in each one. But deathcore has just been like my solid staple. I could listen to it every day, and I found these bands, and I would just listen and listen and listen on. I'd be writing papers or I'd be studying, and I would just be like, okay, I got to find something new. What's new? And there's so much.
Yeah, it's a huge amount to choose from when it comes to deathcore. Yeah.
So I'm one of those types of guys who, as much as I really love the bigger bands like Lorna Shore, and I really love bands like Suicide Silence, Carnifex, Oceano, all the staples in the scene. I'm always been super huge on trying to find as many local or like little bands as humanly possible and giving them spotlight, because I think there's so much talent out there that is completely untapped.
Right.
And I just tell people all the time, give them a chance, because they could end up sounding or being 10 times better than your favorite giant band. People don't give them enough credit.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with that. Like, supporting your local scene as opposed to just turning out for all your Eventco, big venue shows.
Of course.
You find the gems and you find like your favorite bands at those local shows. You never know what small or touring band coming through your local venue is going to, change your complete perspective on music. So,
and this is exactly what happened to me. There's these guys in this band from Toronto. I highly implore, if you really like metalcore, I highly implore you to listen to Cadence Calling. They've been through Montreal a few times in the past few years, but they're not a band anymore. But these guys, I went to go see As Blood Runs Black, Rings of Saturn, Elitist, Upon This Dawning. There was this really awesome tour, and this would have been maybe my second or third show. Wow. And I'd never seen a local band perform before. So these guys get on stage, and I'm kind of just one of those, crossed arms. Like, when's the big bands I want to see going to come on? Because at the time I was like, I don't really care about local music. Like, it was just not. It was a figment of anything I had imagined. Mm-hmm. So these guys started playing, And I remember turning to my buddy Johnny when we were still hanging out and like grabbing him by the shirt and being like, this is out of this world. Like there's this quality from local artists. What? And he's just looking at me like deer in the caught in the headlights going, yeah, dude, these exist. And I remember going up to the table after they were done playing, and I just said, you guys like popped my local band cherry, and it is like I gotta talk to you guys. I gotta pick your brain. Like, how do you do this? And these guys were like, I would have been like 16, 17 at the time. They were like 20, and they're just looking at me like, what the fuck is this dude talking about? Because they were like, they weren't famous by any means, and I was treating them like they were the biggest band in the world. And we ended up forming an amazing friendship, and I went out to so many other local shows and actually met a majority of my other friends in the Toronto scene that I have now. And it just goes to show like how wonderful our local community can pull us together when we think that the only thing out there are these big bands, but there's these wonderful local bands that could have such an amazing effect on you. And it's wonderful.
Definitely props to them too for kind of taking you under the wing and introducing you to, you know, the local scene. Cause there's a lot of bands that open for those bigger tours where they're total, you know, for lack of a better word, jerks. About like, oh well, we play this big venue with As Blood Runs Black and this little 16-year-old, like, we don't have time for you. So props to them for actually believing in like the music and the scene and you know, encouraging some of the younger guys to be a part of it. Like, that's huge.
That's it, man. Those guys are my metal big brothers. I say that all the time. Nicest guys you'd meet. And they were who gave me that kind of outlook where it was like, nobody's too big and nobody's too small. You can always treat people the way that you want to be treated, and you can introduce them. It's almost like having trading cards. Like, oh, you don't have this card? Well, why don't you like check this card out? Like, you might like, if you like that deck, you might like this deck. Like, just, it's so awesome too when you get someone who comes back to you like and looks at you and says, you know, that band that you showed me is like my favorite band now. And that's what it was like with these older like local bands. They would just show me all this stuff. Hey, this is what I listened to when I was a kid. And I'm just like, man, what? Why did I not know about this in 2007? I just feel like I'm so far past, but you know, we're breeding a new generation, man. Some of the quality of the music coming out now is just insane. It blows me away.
Yeah, it's insane. How did you find your vocal sound?
I listened to a lot for a little while. Really, this kind of ties hand in hand with about Pillars of Autumn, but when I was first kind of getting into metal vocals, I feel like I'm just like everybody else. Like I used a lot of YouTube tutorials, and what my favorite YouTube tutorial was Ian Bearer from Rings of Saturn. I know a lot of people don't like that band, but a lot of people love it. So like, but vocally, like, it's such an awesome sounding band. He's just got these monstrous vocals. I would study his video every single night. I would study it after I'd get home from class. And one night in particular, I was sitting down. Fallujah had just released their album, The Flesh Prevails, and it was the coolest atmospheric death metal I'd ever heard. And there's one song in particular called Sapphire that I would just fixate on. I probably listened to it 200 times a day. And I was like, this guy's vocals are monstrous. You can hear what he's saying. The enunciation is awesome. I want to do this. And I would just sit in my room, and I lived at my grandparents at the time. So they'd hear me like just practicing, like in the shower, in my room, wherever. They just hear me belting. And I remember my grandmother comes in one time. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm just like, "Oh, I'm better than okay," because I just figured this technique out. And she's like, "Okay, as long as you're okay." But yeah, I listened to Sapphire, and one night it just clicked, because I would do these kind of really hoarse, very shallow kind of like just almost like you're doing throat vocals, and it was really painful. And one day I just got this sort of a movement with my chords and with my mouth placement, or tongue placement and mouth movements, and I heard it come out just like it sounded on the Fallujah record, and I went, oh my God, if I need to keep doing this now, if I don't keep doing this, muscle memory is going to fade. I'm not going to remember this. I practiced for months. So that would have been my introduction. Like just learning, I always tell people YouTube videos are your best friend, because it's amazing how many vocalists want to share their techniques and want to share how they figured things out. I'm right now trying to figure out how to do kettlebell screams, like really high kettle screams. And there's been a lot of people, you couldn't find anything on it for a long time, because I think like one or two people, surprisingly, a guy from Quebec, Guillaume Villeneuve, yeah, he from Beyond Deviation was the first to do it, and everyone kept trying to like figure it out. So no one was posting videos, and now I have tons of friends who are like, I'll teach you how to do it. Really? Yes. So I mean, it almost feels like I'm still kind of learning, you know?
Yeah.
Every day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can attest to the practice, and I'm just like, what's wrong with you?
We're all bedroom vocalists, man. At one
Everybody's
stage,
yeah,
that's it.
The car's a good one.
Yeah, get that G-force pumping into your chest when you're driving.
So on the same kind of on the same subject as
Sure.
vocals, in the lyrical writing process, what are some of the themes, and do you pull from experience, or is it more like you fixate on like a story or a theme when it comes to the lyrical content for Pillars of Autumn?
Story and a theme for sure. As you know, like we were just talking, I'm a massive fan of Coheed and Cambria. They introduced me to conceptual music, and then I delved into things like Rush, and I started finding all these old, even if you want to go back to one of the earliest concept albums that I can think of is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Band. I mean, dude, I just fell in love with this kind of correlation between telling a story, but also you're listening to something so cool. So with Pillars, I really channel a lot of Claudio Sanchez from Coheed and Cambria, because I just think his lyric writing is so unorthodox. It's all over the place, but it makes sense. Like if you're reading it, you'd be like, what is he talking about? This doesn't like form any sort of coherent thoughts or whatever. But when you really listen and it's put together with the music, it shines through. So that's how I've always written lyrics. Right now, I can't talk too much about it, but we have a new record coming out soon, probably in the next few months. That is a continuation of a past story that we've done. And it's been really challenging trying to connect like what we did a few years ago to what we're doing now. And it was awesome because my guitarist who had come up with the original concept was like, do you want to run with this? And I was like, yeah, let's do it, man. I mean, I'm not going to learn if I don't try. And we ended up making something absolutely phenomenal, very dark, very, it evokes kind of like primal emotion. It's really, really cool. I like to speak to people's emotions as well, because I'm a very emotional guy.
Right.
I love to be in tune with my emotions. And I feel like sometimes the scariest things about humanity don't come from the really bad stuff that you see, but it can come from something as simple as your own mind. Like your own mind could be its own worst enemy, and the darkest, most disturbing parts of humanity are formed in the mind. And I just think that I wanted to go outside of the physically violent imagery and the shock value imagery and go with something that was a little bit more psychological, that was going to speak to people psychologically. So that's kind of how I go at lyrics. It's always about if we're studying a certain subject, or we're going to sing or talk about a certain subject on a song, I'll go and if it's going to be a murderer or something, or the psychology of murderers, I'm going to go and I'm going to watch, either some old slasher flicks
right.
just for the fun side, or some of the more, deeply disturbing psychological stuff. Like, for this record, I watched a lot of Dexter. Funny enough, I watched a lot of Dexter because it's a little bit funny. It's a little bit psychological. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where, movies, TV, video games, books, like anything you can pull from pop culture that you can kind of twist and make it really interesting is what I love to do. A buddy of mine always called me like the Tim Burton of deathcore, because he's like, you like to take really simple concepts and make them really fucked up. And I was like, that's what I love to do, man. 100%. Just make it a little weird.
That's great. Yeah, I love that you're speaking about more into like the internal emotional side of things and like fears in the mind. Because I feel like that's definitely a trend that, especially in metal and things like that, like Knocked Loose's most recent album, A Different Shade of Blue, is literally just all about depression.
Right.
So it's definitely important to be more focused on mental issues and mental health than like, I know it's fun to speak about the physical violence and everything and brutal music. But there's also a complete, like all of those ideas definitely come from within. So exploring those emotions and that mental like kind of psychosis is definitely a super interesting route to take.
For sure, man. I think it's really important to speak on, what people are going through right now in their lifetime. Like, our parents' generation, the adversity they faced is so much different than the adversity we face on a daily basis. And I always say to people now, like the biggest enemy we have is an invisible one. We can't really see these mental illnesses. We know more about them. We know a little bit more about how to treat them, but there's still some people who are living with these horrible, horrible diseases or these horrible, horrible afflictions that they can't escape from. So I feel like it's important to kind of give people this platform in music to be able to speak about these issues, because whereas before it felt like nobody was listening, now you have all these people who are listening and sharing and saying, I identify with this, and that's extremely powerful.
Definitely. The recording that you guys most recently did was the split Cambria.
Yeah, with our buddies in Beguiler.
Yeah, it's brutal as fuck.
Thank you.
So you guys are releasing in the next couple of months a new album, and
yes, sir.
I know a big trend, especially in deathcore and some of like the heavier subgenres, a lot of people are more focused on in-house recording. Is that something that you guys are doing, or are you guys working with a producer in a studio, taking like kind of the old-fashioned route?
So luckily with Pillars, and I feel like we're kind of heading in this direction with a lot of deathcore bands now, is our guitarist and our bassist. So Devin Grote, our main guitarist, and then our bassist Ryan Morrison are both audio engineers. So it's wonderful to have these two people in the band who are really focused, and they're keeping us on this straight and narrow path. And they know what they want. They know what they want to hear. They know the sound that they want to evoke from the instruments and from me. And it's been really nice because there's been no guessing. So what we do is we do all of our recording in-house. We go to either like our bassist studio or our guitarist studio. We have different things we'll do at each one. And then we'll work with a producer to actually mix and master the album and kind of lead all the last kind of untouched frontier for them to kind of work with and mold. And they'll send us stuff and say, hey, this is what I've done. Like, what do you think of this? And it's a lovely collaborative effort. So right now we're working with a producer from the Toronto area named Keegan Okazaki. He's a wonderful dude. He's making a lot of really big steps in our scene, and he's helping out a lot of local bands kind of find their sound. So that's how we went this time around. But prior to that, we used a guy from Sweden named Gustav, very, very nice guy, awesome dude, was super enthusiastic about the music. And he was lovely when it came to suggestions, and we were young and we didn't really know what we were doing. So he would kind of point us in the right direction. And it was a lovely, lovely relationship that hasn't quite come to an end. We're just, seeking other options and working with other people. And I think it's important to kind of expand your horizons when it comes to music producers and kind of working with people who are going to each album cycle give you a little something different.
Right. And even that outside perspective is extremely important because the music is personal to everybody involved in writing.
Of course.
So having somebody outside to say, that doesn't make sense. Let's explore a different option.
No, exactly. Because you love the music and you want it to, you like it no matter how it sounds. It could be shit and no one would know. And you'd just be like, this is the best work I've ever done. And it's great to have the producer in the background kind of bringing you back down to reality and saying like, I love what you did here. I see where you're going, but what if we turned it kind of this way? And then you'll be standing there going, why didn't I think of that? So it's been great.
It's just, sometimes it does take that outside to skew it.
Of course.
Let's knock it out of whack a bit. Yeah, definitely.
100%.
That's cool. I really like kind of the hybrid recording that a lot of people. I was listening to a podcast with the vocalist from Vulvadinia.
Oh yeah, Duncan Bentley.
Yes, and he was talking about they had Chris Donaldson from Cryptopsy do the mix, and I think he produced it. But they recorded everything in South Africa in their studio and sent him the tracks to probably mix and produce, and they were kind of going back and forth. So I'm very interested in this new kind of hybrid where bands are tracking and everything, and then getting a producer involved in some of the final stages, and they can add the post-production elements and things like that kind of glue everything together.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people will say that, each region kind of has its, when it comes to anything, but especially with deathcore, each region kind of has its own kind of sound, right? So I feel like, if you're an Australian band, Australian deathcore is in a complete league of its own.
Yes.
Then you got Canadian deathcore, which I feel like is more rooted in kind of hip hop, sort of stylistically, adhering to those kind of aspects. And then you have the States who pioneered the melodic death metal introduction into deathcore and creating bands like As Blood Runs Black or bands like Suffocate or whatever. And you have these regions, these sub-regions in the States as well, like California and Texas, and everyone's doing something different. So it's really nice to be able to be a Canadian band and send something that you've recorded here stylistically that fits your region and what people are doing around you, what you're influenced by, and sending it to someone, I don't know, in Japan or something, producer in Japan who's got more of these Eastern elements and is more into this pop culture kind of music, and they could be this would be really cool accents to add to your music and stuff that you wouldn't even think of,
right,
that are completely out of the realm of what you thought you were going for. And it's just a wonderful, like I said, collaborative effort. It's just beautiful that we can come together as a community internationally and sort of work together to create something absolutely magical.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking with you. This has been a really great time sharing
Grayson,
about
man, thank you.
deathcore and all of your knowledge. It makes me so excited to see younger people, stoked on metal and deathcore and things like that.
I completely agree, man. I mean, we're all in this together relatively at the end of the day. Show your friends music that you love. And if you show them that music with the level of enthusiasm you have for it, I just think it makes anybody enthusiastic about it.
For sure.
You telling me about that Kublai Khan stuff, as soon as we're off here, I'm going and I'm listening and I'm probably going to punch some holes in some walls.
Yeah, do it. Who cares?
Well, I don't know if my parents will really, share our sentiment, but too bad.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you'd be I'll mud it later, I'll mud it.
But yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on here. It was wonderful. I really hope we get to do it again someday. This is such an amazing concept, and I hope that you see a ton of success in it, my friend.
I appreciate it. I do have one last question for you.
Sure.
What's your favorite city for Beans and Breakdowns?
Favorite city?
For Beans and Breakdowns.
Honestly, man, I'd have to go with Toronto. Got to give it to my home city. Got to give the love to my home city. I'm sure that there's so many other better ones out there, but this is what I know. This is where I feel at home. The bands, the breakdowns, the beans, it's all wonderful here in Toronto. And I implore anybody listening to come and visit, and we will show you the greatest time ever.
That's respect right there, man. Repping that city hard.
I got to show love, man.
That's right. Well, Nick, have a great rest of your Saturday. I really, really appreciate you coming on and hanging out.
Grayson, you as well, my friend. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beans and Breakdowns. I want to say a huge shout out to Nick for coming on the podcast and hanging out with me on a Saturday morning to drink some coffee and talk about deathcore. Be sure to check out Pillars of Autumn on Instagram at Pillars of Autumn Official, and you can find them on Bandcamp or any other listening platform to listen to their most recent release, Canopsia, with the Toronto-based deathcore band Beguiler. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. Also, you can find out more information about the podcast online at beansandbreakdowns.com or on Instagram at beansandbreakdowns. Until next week, stay caffeinated and wake the fuck up!